Kyle from Stall Agronomy, and I want to talk a little bit about stuff that's going on. Obviously, I'm in the office. I was trying to do a video yesterday. I forgot my iPhone dongle for my mic, but it was windy regardless, and there's a few guys planting. It really wasn't a lot going on. You know, we got I got down to the south. There's some sand ground around like Palmyra area in Wisconsin that was going yesterday. There's a few people going kind of closer to my house, but outside I have a few fields planted around the farm. There wasn't much going on in the fields yesterday, and you know, we got about a half an inch of rain overnight and into this morning. So really not a whole lot going on today and probably tomorrow, and the rest of the week doesn't look great. So I want to talk a little bit about GDUs, GDDs, growing degree units, growing degree days. Everybody calls them different things. I usually use GDDs, but today I use GDUs, interchangeable terms. So just a little bit about how to calculate those. That's going to be the first thing I'll talk about. So GDUs, we measure our temperatures between 86 and 50. So when we figure in the formula here, we figure the high 86 or less. So if the high is above 50 and if it's under 86, so if it's 92, you still count 86. If it's 84, you count 84. If it's 50, it's 0 basically. So you take the high minus 50, and then you take the low above 50 and below 86, and then subtract 50 from that also. So, and then to get the actual DU or GDUs for the day, you divide by 2. So on like an average day for us, if it's 75 degrees, so that's basically we're 25 degrees above 50. So there's 25 here, and we're say 52, so we get 2. So 25 and 2, 27 divided by 2 is be 13.5. So that'd be a 13.5 day. That's kind of how we've calculated. So that's how you figure out GDUs. More often than not, you can find places online that just tell you how many GDUs you have. There's a place I usually use, Useful to Usable. That's one of the easiest tools. You can pull it up. They have all this stuff. You put in your location, you put in your planting date. You can even put in your hybrid maturity, and it'll tell you when your predicted frost date's going to be, when your predicted maturity, black layers is, when they think it's going to flower. All that stuff's in there. So it's actually a really cool tool. So more often than not, I don't really do this unless I want to do something like this. So yesterday, there was a few people that were planting because they wanted to get their long maturity corn in. So their whole hope was they can get their maturity, their longer stuff in, and you know, calendar-wise, it's got to go in, or else we're not going to be able to plant it. Yeah, there's something to that. On a normal year, you're better off getting it in early. You know, you're better off yield-wise, and you're going to be better off and ahead if you can get it in a week early. Usually we got 14 degree days per day at this point. So for them, yeah, if you get it in a week early, you're talking basically emergence, which is 120 GDUs or GDDs on average. Sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 140, but 120 is usually about what we figure. So yeah, if they can get in a week earlier, they basically get emergence before we can plant. So yeah, they're like a week ahead. But the thing is, I went through, this is, you know, this completely, it's a forecast. It's not, this is not what's going to happen. But when we look at the forecast this morning, these are the temperatures we're expecting, at least this week. This is AccuWeather. We have some other local stuff that goes out this far, but nobody really goes this far other than AccuWeather and Weather Channel and some of the apps that aren't exactly accurate, but this is close enough, and this is what we'll use. So trying to get it in the other day. So basically yesterday, guys were mudding in. I got a call from somebody who said that the trench wouldn't even close, but they had to get this corn in. So yeah, I get that and I understand it. But when we look at the temperature forecast, so today the high is supposed to be 52, the low is 37 tonight. So we get 1 GDU. Tomorrow, a high of 58 and a low of 39. We get 4 GDUs. 0 on Wednesday because it's going to be colder than heck. Thursday, 0.5. You know, it goes on. And then later in the week, we get into the high 50s and low 60s, and we're picking up like 5 a day. So the grand total of what we could expect is 28 GDUs, or 2 days, basically, advance of somebody planting a week and 10 days from now. So really aren't any money ahead, and you just mudded in all your corn, and yeah, you planted it on May 5th, but at the same time, you could plant it on May 13th, and you're only like a day behind. So these are things that it's a challenge when you're an agronomist and you're trying to talk to people through decisions like that. So the other thing I want to talk about is switching corn and soybean maturities. That's always the thing that comes up. University data is always going to show, at least in Wisconsin, is about May 20th is when we want to switch. And the reasoning behind it is before May 20th, you're still money ahead yield-wise. There's more yield potential in the longer season maturities than planting shorter season maturities. Once we hit about May 20th, that date, basically if I were you, I would take a calendar, find May 20th, and circle it. So at May 20th, your dry down basically doesn't outweigh the yield benefit of these longer season maturities. So May 20th is a day, theoretically, on average, to switch. So I've had people tell me May 15th is the day they're going to switch, and May 25th, and June 1st, and yeah, I understand that. That's all up to interpretation. The university is going to give us a guideline. It's not the Bible by any means. For me, May 20th is the day. I'm not going to say if you switch on May 18th or you switch on May 22nd that's the worst thing in the world. It really sucks when you're a seed dealer. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I keep saying that. Yeah, my cliches. But yeah, it sucks. But once we get to that date, when I hit that date, I know. And if you're a halfway decent seed dealer, today is May 6th. In about 3 or 4 days from now, we're going to start making the phone calls. And if we think that May 20th is coming and we haven't got a whole lot of corn in the ground, we're going to start making some of those moves and try to figure that stuff out. So, don't be surprised. And if your seed dealer is surprised by you maybe potentially wanting to switch 2 weeks from now, that's a signal of a bad seed dealer. But no, if they're not thinking about it, they should be, and most people are. And honestly, for me, it's not that big of a deal. It really stinks. We got to move a bunch of stuff around, return stuff, but it happens. It's just the business. So we'll talk about bean maturities. Bean maturity is totally different than corn. So corn is we're talking GDUs when we talk corn. When we talk soybeans, we're talking about day length, and day length is a totally different animal. We have a different kind of soybean than like South America has. South America has soybeans that are like corn. They're heat driven. Ours are more driven by day length. And if you plant a 2.5 soybean on May 1st and you plant it on May 30th, I would say you're going to be within probably 7 to 14 days difference in.
A few moments later.
I forgot to hit do not disturb, so we're going to jump right back in. So yeah, we're talking about soybeans. 7 to 14 days difference, and like a flowering date from like a month difference in planting time on our indeterminate soybeans. So for the soybeans, yeah, it's not that big of a difference. When we really look at them, we're talking about May 20th on corn. And bean maturity, we're really talking about June. First week of June is when we start talking about differences of maturity. And I've seen 2.5 soybeans, 2.4 soybeans come out about the same day or within a couple days of like a 1.8 and 1.9 in our area. And I've actually seen a 2.8 soybean out mature a 2.4 soybean before, planted the same day. So I am not worried about soybeans at this point. Put that in the back of your mind. I don't want to talk about it for like another month. And I really hope we don't get to that point. The next thing we'll talk about, and the last thing we'll talk about, is carbon nitrogen penalty. And Ken Ferry talks about this all the time. And the reason I'm bringing it up is, everybody makes fun of me for this, but it's from my yard. I highly manage my yard at home here, and I got a lot of neighbors that don't. And one of my neighbors who doesn't, and didn't put hardly any fertilizer on last year and decided to put fertilizer on this year, has a much darker and greener lawn than I do, which is totally obscure. It doesn't usually happen. And the reason for that, at least in my mind, and I think it's fairly easy to understand where I'm coming from with this, but he put on hardly any fertilizer last year, didn't have a lot of growth. He'd probably mow it once every 10 to 14 days. He has almost zero residue in his yard. So basically his thatch layer in his yard is like nothing. My thatch layer in my yard is just tremendous. We had so much rain last year. I managed it the same as I always do. We just were mowing every 3 to 4 days. I had just tons of residue, tons of thatch in my yard. So I need to break that down, even though I put on fall nitrogen and I put on sulfur this spring like I usually do with gypsum. And then I went back and put some more nitrogen on with Milorganite. And I probably have twice the amount of nitrogen he has on his yard right now. My yard's still yellow. And I didn't put any really readily available nitrogen on this spring. I put some slow release on. I just kind of want an easy green up in spring. I'm more after iron content. Totally off the topics of corn, but for me, I just wanted to get, I don't want to promote a lot of early growth outside of what it's normally going to do. Cool season grasses, we just get lots of growth anyway. I just want dark green. That's all I care about. And I'm not getting that. I'm getting dog pea spots that are turning really dark green, and the rest of my yard's really yellow. We just have tons of thatch. I had tons of residue out there. So cold winter, we had an early fall. We harvested late, in the most part. I wouldn't say too late, but we harvested and it was frosty. I think the first day we did combining, we were scraping frost off the windows. So not a lot of residue breakdown over fall. We had a lot of stuff coming off late. We got a lot of residue out there. We had a ton of rain. We had tremendous growth in some of these hybrids. So we've got trash, we've got residue, we've got stuff that just needs to break that stuff down. And we have to have microbes need nitrogen to get that carbon to nitrogen ratio in check. So if microbes don't have enough nitrogen, they tie up nitrogen, basically to break down residue. So when we're planting corn, and this is even in soybean stubble, so they're still going to have to break down bean stubble. We had beans that looked like they were 60, 80 bushel beans that were yielding 40 bushels, but they were just huge plants, and we're going to have to break all that stuff down. So cool spring, right? Obviously we just got done talking about this not too long ago, and it's been cold. We've had some warm days, but it's been pretty cold for the most part. And it was kind of a late spring. It is a late spring. And so we got very little residue breakdown in spring. We had very little residue breakdown in fall and over winter. So we got tons of residue. We are going to go out and try to plant corn into it, or do tillage and then plant corn into it. We need more nitrogen. I think the biggest lesson I learned last year is we need to have more nitrogen up front. We were kind of caught in that program of, we're putting a little bit of nitrogen on with our pre-spray. Well, last year corn was up before we could get that on, so then we're like, well, let's just top dress it. And then we got more rain and then we couldn't get it on. And our corn was just yellow for weeks. It was terrible. So for me, I really want to get nitrogen on as soon as possible this year. If you can get that sprayer in the field the day after you plant corn, do it. If you can get nitrogen maybe on pre-plants this year, I would put on to it if you're doing dry. AMS has got ammonium in it. Urea takes a week or two to break down to where it's plant available. It's not in a form that is plant available. There is no ammonium or nitrate in that nitrogen. It's just urea. So get that stuff on. Put some anhydrous on. I would really caution that as late as we're getting. We really want to wait a week between nitrogen application on ammonia before corn planting, just to keep from burning roots or doing anything other damage. So we're really getting the end of that window. But UAN with a planter. Don't go out and buy a UAN setup for your planter this year, but just get some UAN or nitrogen on ASAP as soon as before you plant or right after, just to get that seed to N ratio in check so that we're not paying some of that carbon penalty. So anyway, that's it. There's just a lot of stuff going on, but there's not anything going on. At the same time, and it really kind of stinks. But these are all things we need to be talking about. We should be talking about why, I've got corn in the ground from April 24th, and this is May 6th, and it just has a little radical shoot on it. There's nothing going on. It's swollen up, and everything, but it's not really ready to go. We have soybeans that were planted about that same time. They're not even swollen. They're just sitting there. And, those guys that got planting in, they're no longer or no further really ahead than anybody else. So it really stinks. On average, usually those guys would be way ahead of us, but we're going to be kind of falling behind the 8 ball on some of this stuff. So all things to think about. So think about GDUs, think about when we're switching maturities. Don't freak out just yet. It's still May 6th. We got 2 weeks to get stuff in. And, if you're in a 105-day maturity zone like we are, and you got 105-day in the shed, don't freak out until May 15th or so. I wouldn't even freak out then. I would just be cautious and understand what the dry down is on hybrids. Hybrids are going to adjust the maturity. On average, I think I heard something about 6.8 GDUs per day of delayed planting. So, if we drop, from May 1st until May 15th, we could drop about 70 GDUs off of that corn hybrid. So 70 is a pretty big number. That's the difference between like a 105 and a 103. So it's really going to make a difference when you start looking at some of this stuff. So anyway, that's it. We're done. We're done with the doom and gloom. It's still raining outside. So I'm going to get back to some office work, but all things to think about. If you guys got questions, anybody needs some help with stuff or wants to yell at me about stuff, that's fine. Try not to yell at me. I did just a podcast episode about complaint claims and not yelling at your retailer. But, all this stuff is just basic math. It's basic understanding things. These are basic agronomy stuff. Nothing really too hard, but these are things you need to think about. I wiped my whiteboard totally clean this morning and just put this on. And I love having these things. I have one here. I have a bigger one in our kitchen. We write on these things all the time. It's just something that just kind of dot down ideas. So anyway, that's Kyle from Soul Agronomy, and I'll hopefully see you maybe next week. I keep saying that, but we'll see you next week, and hopefully we're in a field somewhere. But hopefully everybody can kind of just calm down, drink a couple cold ones maybe, and take a week to kind of relax. And like we are doing, we're going to get the planter just anything wrong that we could think possibly could go wrong, we're going to try to fix tomorrow. So when we roll out of the shed, we're ready to go. So I'll catch you guys next time.